Night fell heavily over the small town of Dry Creek, with its dirt streets and silhouettes disappearing among the wooden posts in the flickering light of the street lamps. It was into this landscape that Cole Maddox appeared, a man whose presence seemed to carry the weight of an entire world on his shoulders. His footsteps echoed firmly and decisively, marking the return of someone who had once been a part of these lands, but had disappeared years ago, swallowed by a pain that only silence can conceal. Cole wasn't returning to relive old memories or reunite with old friends. He was returning with a clear mission engraved in the core of his being: the search for justice, or rather, revenge. It was impossible to look at that man without noticing the traces of the profound loss that had shaped him. Cole's gaze, hard and relentless, bore the marks of sleepless nights and shattered dreams. The memory of the family he had lost, torn apart by cruel and relentless hands, was the invisible fire that fueled his determination. Each step on that dusty ground was a heartbeat pulsing with the urgency to settle accounts with the past. Who were responsible? What shadows still haunted the city? These questions lingered in the air, fueling the curiosity and suspense surrounding his return. Cole Maddox was more than a man seeking justice. He was a symbol of pain transformed into courage and loneliness transformed into strength. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, that the ghosts of yesteryear still had sharp teeth, and that the path to redemption was treacherous. But there was no room for hesitation. The town, small and full of whispers, would be the stage where he would face the enemies who stole his peace and tore his world apart. Revenge for him was not just an act of retaliation, but the last hope of finding meaning after the emptiness. The cold night air mingled with the heavy silence that preceded the storm. Cole carried with him not only a revolver, but a wounded heart, yearning to close a chapter that insisted on remaining open. His presence aroused suspicious glances, and behind his closed expression lay the constant reminder that, in Dry Creek, nothing was as simple as it seemed. It was a town where secrets lurked around every corner, and where the past kept watchful eyes, ready to judge and punish. Cole knew he was entering a territory where justice mingled with violence, and where every choice could be his last. But what truly drove Cole beyond a thirst for revenge? It was the silent promise he made to himself, a vow to never again allow pain to dominate his life without a fight. He didn't just want to settle accounts with those responsible. He also wanted redemption, to find a reason to continue existing beyond the bitterness. This journey was more than a hunt. It was a search for a new beginning, even if he didn't yet know where to find it. The weight of the past was enormous, but it was also the only thing keeping him going. As Cole walked through the dusty streets, the atmosphere seemed to conspire against him. The moon partially illuminated his face, scarred by an inner battle, reflecting a man torn between a desire for revenge and a need to reconnect with what remained of humanity in his heart. Every shadow seemed to hide an enemy, every whisper carried a warning. And there, in that city forgotten by time, began a chapter where danger, pain, and the possibility of unexpected love would intertwine in ways no one could have foreseen. Cole Maddox's arrival did not go unnoticed. Rumors began to circulate, and watchful eyes watched the stranger who carried within him a secret and a purpose that could forever change the history of Dry Creek. What would he find in this arid land? What forces would rise against him, and who would be the woman capable of transforming it all, breaking down the barriers of hatred and distrust? These questions lingered, setting the stage for a story that wasn't just about revenge, but about the complexity of the human heart in the face of second chances. The night wore on, and Cole Maddox moved forward, carrying with each step the pain of an unforgiving past and the hope of a future he hadn't yet dared dream of. And as the stars began to appear in the sky, destiny began to draw the first contours of a journey that would unite courage, love, and redemption. A story that was only just beginning. The morning in the town of Dry Creek was slowly dawning, the sun casting its first rays over the wooden buildings that creaked in the dry desert wind. The dirt streets reflected the golden light as a few residents began their daily routines, but it was at the Turner boarding house that the true pulse of the town was felt. There, in the heart of town, Abigail Turner ruled her small domain with a quiet authority, something only those who knew her story could understand. Abigail wasn't just the boarding house owner, she was a woman who carried in her eyes the strength of someone who had survived storms far greater than those the wind could bring. Ever since she lost everything in a tragedy that still haunted her, Abigail had closed herself off from the world, not out of weakness, but out of a conscious decision to protect what little she had left. She bore invisible scars, marks of a past the entire town knew about, though no one dared ask directly. Her life was a fine line between maintaining order at the boarding house and dealing with the pain he insisted on refusing. To give in. Relationships, for her, were doors she never opened, not for lack of desire, but for fear of repeating the cruel history that had shaped her. There was a wall around her heart, a fortress built with walls of caution and silence. When Cole Maddox walked through the boarding house door that morning, his eyes shadowed by the past and the weight of revenge, Abigail immediately realized he was no ordinary visitor. He didn't blend in with the other outsiders. His presence had an almost palpable intensity, as if he carried within him not only a mission, but also a storm ready to erupt at any moment. She watched him from afar, assessing every gesture, every step he took through the small room. Cole, in turn, felt the impact of that firm, unwavering gaze, which betrayed neither fear nor fragility, but a strength that challenged him without needing to say a word. Their meeting was inevitable, and fraught with a tension no one in the boarding house could escape. Abigail wasn't the kind of woman easily impressed, and Cole wasn't a man to be swayed by any look. There was something in the way she maintained her composure, despite her losses and silent battles, that sparked an unexpected curiosity in him. She seemed to carry a secret as heavy as his, a pain so deep that only her eyes could attempt to decipher it. And in that moment, in that silent exchange, they both recognized that they were before someone capable of changing not only each other's fate, but perhaps the entire history of that forgotten town. Abigail felt Cole's approach as a rupture in her meticulously constructed routine. She knew that men like him didn't just seek shelter or respite. They brought with them untold stories, unfulfilled revenge, and sometimes silent hopes of redemption. Cole, in turn, found in Abigail a presence that neither intimidated nor promised ease, but offered something rare in that arid land, the possibility of trust, something fragile, still emerging, but that could, if cared for, transform the harshness of his days into something more bearable. Despite the few restrained words exchanged between them, their connection grew. Every gesture, every look carried a hidden meaning. Abigail, with her quiet wisdom, understood that the man there was not just a stranger driven by rage, but a man who also needed to be seen, understood, and perhaps saved. And Cole, despite his unwavering focus, began to realize that this woman, with her dark past and immense strength, could hold the key to something he hadn't yet dared name, a second chance, a love possible even amidst the darkness. But even as the flame of their connection began to burn between them, the past insisted on not being left behind. Abigail carried her own ghosts, and Cole had a road of blood and justice to travel. The tension between the desire to move forward and the fear of what might come to light made every moment tense, laden with unspoken meaning. And there, in that setting as fragile as the surrounding desert, a story was born that would not only be about revenge, but about how two souls marked by suffering could find a reason to fight together, even when everything seemed to conspire against them. The town, which until then seemed like a silent stage, began to come to life through these two characters who discovered they were closer than they ever imagined. Abigail Turner, with her strength and her secrets, and Cole Maddox, with his broken heart and his thirst for justice, were about to cross paths that would change everything, not just for them, but for everyone living under that unforgiving Wild West sky. But what exactly would their encounter bring? And how would this woman, with her painful past, impact the mission Cole had sworn to fulfill? These questions hung in the air, announcing that their story was only just beginning to unfold. The days in Dry Creek dragged on under the relentless heat of the Old West sun, but inside the Turner boarding house, a different kind of heat was beginning to build, slow and silent, between Cole Maddox and Abigail Turner. The atmosphere around these two men and women, each carrying their own worlds of pain and scars, felt charged with something unspoken, an almost palpable tension that kept them close yet wary, as if they both knew they were on the verge of crossing a line that could not be undone. It was a delicate play between trust and fear, desire and doubt, a dance where every gesture and word concealed layers of meaning that could not always be immediately deciphered. Cole, with his steady gaze and life-hardened posture, seemed to carry an invisible burden with every step he took. But there was something that, despite himself, began to seep into the rigidity of his mission, the possibility of finding in Abigail something more than just passing company. She was different from all the other figures who populated his journey of revenge. She was not just a woman, but a presence that awakened in his chest a feeling he had long tried to forget: hope. But this hope was accompanied by an intense internal struggle. Each time their eyes met, he felt the weight of his bloody past, the relentless commitment to settle accounts with those who destroyed his family, and the fear that by opening himself to Abigail, he might lose everything he had so determinedly sought. Abigail, for her part, was fighting her own silent battles. The ghosts that haunted her were always lurking, ready to emerge and remind her of the tragedy that shaped her life. Every smile she managed to summon when she was with Cole was, for her, a small victory against the pain that insisted on not going away. But the past doesn't forgive easily, and the shadow of her losses made her hesitant to surrender, fearing that by opening her heart she might relive the pain of losing everything all over again. Their forced coexistence, the conversations that began to emerge, albeit cautious and brief, brought to light not only her vulnerabilities, but also an unexpected strength, the strength that arises when two hurt people choose, against all odds, to trust each other. This tension, fraught with closely guarded secrets, created an atmosphere charged with mystery and emotion within the boarding house. Cole, who had always been a man of few words, began to reveal fragments of his story, contained tales, silences that spoke louder than any confession. Abigail, with her firm manner and all-seeing gaze, felt she could read, between the lines, that those silences hid deep pain, a truth not yet ready to be fully revealed. They were like two pieces of a puzzle that, despite their sharp edges, were beginning to fit together with surprising ease. But the reality of the Wild West was not kind to hearts trying to heal. Cole was caught between the desire to exact his revenge and the need to protect what was beginning to grow there, a faint flame that could mean redemption or destruction. The line between impossible love and relentless duty grew thinner with each passing day, making every moment together a silent battle against the fate that seemed to conspire to keep them apart. Abigail, for her part, felt the weight of fear growing with every step she took toward Cole, knowing that if she gave in completely, she could lose not only what little she had left, but also the security she had worked so hard to build. As the city continued its relentless pace, amidst whispers and curious glances, something greater than anyone could have imagined was happening in that boarding house. The two wounded hearts, trapped in their own emotional prisons, began to open a glimmer of hope, a hope that challenged the past, that questioned revenge, and that silently promised the possibility of a different future. It was a story of secrets slowly revealed, of internal conflicts manifested in gestures and glances, and of an unlikely connection that, despite everything, weathered the invisible storms that surrounded them. And so, between heavy silences and whispered conversations in the twilight, Cole and Abigail navigated this unfamiliar territory where love and pain intertwined. Each day brought new doubts, new fears, but also small moments of tenderness that seemed to defy fate itself. They knew time was short, that the revenge driving Cole wouldn't wait forever, and that Abigail's secrets could be as dangerous as the enemies he sought. Yet, there, in that isolated boarding house, something was beginning to blossom, a rare connection, forged of courage and vulnerability that promised to change everything, if only they could overcome their own ghosts. But what would happen when the deepest secrets came to light? How far would Cole be willing to go in the name of revenge? And how far would Abigail give in to a feeling that threatened to destabilize her fortress? These questions lingered in the air, like a silent promise that the story that began there was far from over. The outcome was yet to come. But before that happened, the next chapters would give voice to the fears, the difficult choices, and the strength that arises when two souls marked by the past meet and challenge the future. Dusk was tinged with orange as Cole Maddox returned to the boarding house, his face etched with road dust and the weight of a storm about to break upon his soul. His steps were heavy, each movement carrying the accumulated weariness of years spent wandering in search of something that kept him awake. Justice, revenge, redemption. But tonight, there was something else in Cole's hard expression, a gleam in his eyes that betrayed restlessness and confusion, the sense that the past was about to reveal a secret that could change everything. Abigail Turner was waiting for him on the porch, her silhouette silhouetted against the warm light streaming through the boarding house windows. As he approached, the silence between them spoke louder than any words. It was as if fate had finally decided to unite those two hearts marked by deep pain and immense secrets, and what was to come promised to be a definitive turning point for both of them. Inside that house, the hidden past would begin to emerge, revealing unexpected connections they had never imagined before. Sitting in the small room, lit by the flickering flame of the fireplace, Abigail looked at Cole with a mixture of apprehension and courage. She knew she could no longer hide everything that weighed heavily on her heart, and that, for something new to blossom between them, she needed to face the ghosts that haunted them. In a low voice, almost a whisper, she began to reveal pieces of her story, the scars she bore, the tragedy that nearly destroyed her, and a secret she had kept hidden until then, out of fear, shame, and perhaps protection. Cole listened intently, each word cutting deep, for, unbeknownst to him, part of that secret crossed the fine line that separated his revenge from the truth. Abigail told him of a fateful night, a betrayal that had scarred the town, and of a man behind his own pain, a man with dangerous connections, who stalked the shadows of the very story he was trying to unravel. Little by little, Cole realized that the enemy he sought was not just a face distant from his revenge, but someone who, directly or indirectly, had intertwined their lives in ways they could never have foreseen. The revelation descended upon them like a storm. The line between past and present, between revenge and love, became even more tenuous and impossible to ignore. Cole felt his heart tighten, a conflict tearing at his soul. For years he had clung to the idea of ruthless justice, of the inevitable confrontation with those who destroyed his family. Now, faced with Abigail, that resolve seemed less clear. The woman he was beginning to love was not just a temporary refuge, but a vital part of the complex web that defined what he wanted and what he was willing to sacrifice. Abigail, for her part, felt the weight of her confession as intense as her fear of what would come next. She knew that revealing that secret could change everything, could push Cole away, or perhaps bring him closer to a future that until then seemed impossible. Her voice wavered, but there was a quiet strength behind it, the hope that together they could face whatever came, or at least try. She saw in his eyes the same struggle she felt within herself, a desire to start over, even though the past insisted on haunting them. The tension in that moment was palpable, a mixture of fear, desire, and urgency that made it clear nothing would ever be the same again. The clock seemed to speed up, time shortening. Cole had to decide, pursue the revenge that had consumed his life, or gamble on the unexpected love that was beginning to blossom, even if it meant giving up everything he had sworn to protect. The doubt was painful, an open wound that bled slowly, and he knew the choice would define the rest of his existence. Outside, the city continued its relentless course, oblivious to the turmoil unfolding in that small room. But for Cole and Abigail, every second was a step toward an uncertain future where the past could be both a prison and the key to freedom. The enemy was closer than ever, threats loomed like unsettling shadows, and the decision had to be made before it was too late. As the fireplace flames cast flickering shadows across the walls, a certainty began to form in Cole's heart. There was no turning back. The journey that had brought him here was about to change forever, and that night was just the beginning of a path that would challenge everything he believed to be right. Abigail, with her mysterious past and quiet strength, was no longer a distant figure, but an essential part of that story, a story that still held surprises, dangers, and perhaps a redemption that seemed impossible. And so, in that decisive moment, between confessions and heavy glances, Cole and Abigail faced not only an external enemy, but also the ghosts that lived within them. The approaching choice was not just about revenge or love, but about who they would be from then on. The future awaited, unpredictable and unforgiving, and the only certainty was that nothing would ever be the same again. The next step would be crucial, and the consequences would reverberate far beyond these walls. But what would happen when the line between enemy and ally began to blur, and how to face an unforgiving past when the heart yearns for redemption? The answer, as always, was yet to come, in a story that had not yet ended. Night fell heavily over the small town, shrouding every street in thick shadows, and a silence that seemed to precede the storm. Cole Maddox walked with firm steps, his face hardened by the determination that had been with him for years, but this time there was something different in his gaze. It wasn't just the fury of revenge that guided him, but also the faint yet powerful flame of a new beginning. The figure of Abigail Turner lingered in his mind, a silent presence that accompanied him with every step, filling this pain-scarred man with a courage he hadn't known he still possessed. He knew that tonight wouldn't just be a confrontation, but the final test of everything he carried within him. Justice for his family, yes, but also the possibility of redemption. His enemies were closer than ever, scattered throughout the city like menacing figures, ready to destroy what was left of Cole. But unlike in the past, he was no longer alone. Abigail, with her strength and courage, had become his support, his safe haven amidst the chaos. As his adversary's footsteps echoed through the dirt streets, Cole felt his heart race, not from fear, but from the knowledge that this was his chance to choose between the revenge that consumed him or the future he could build with someone who accepted him, with all his mistakes and scars. The tension was palpable, each second dragging as the figures approached, the imminent confrontation about to explode into a whirlwind of emotions and decisions. Abigail stood beside him, her hand firmly clasped in his, a silent gesture that spoke louder than any words. She was living proof that even in the darkest places, love could emerge as an unexpected light, a second chance worth seizing. Cole took a deep breath, feeling the deep connection that had grown between them, and found the strength not only to face his enemies, but to confront his own inner demons. The duel began with restrained violence, every movement calculated, every look filled with unspoken stories. Cole fought not only against the men who destroyed his family, but against the rage that threatened to overwhelm him completely. In the midst of that battle, he realized that true strength came from something greater than the thirst for revenge. It came from the hope of a new beginning, the desire to build a life where he could finally be free. Abigail, watching closely, felt her heart pound with the intensity of that moment. She knew their fate hung in the balance, that Cole's choice would define not only his future, but hers as well. Her courage translated into silent support, a strength he could feel even from a distance, giving him the resolve to carry on. When the final confrontation ended and the echoes of the fight faded, Cole Maddox remained standing, not as a defeated man, but as someone who had chosen his path, no longer that of blind revenge, but that of transformation. He looked at Abigail, and in that moment, amidst the dust and silence that followed the storm, he recognized that he had found something he never expected, a love capable of healing the deepest wounds. The city, silent witness to that final battle, seemed to breathe with them, as if the air were charged with a new beginning. Cole and Abigail knew the scars of the past wouldn't disappear overnight, but together they were ready to face whatever came, building a life defined not by past mistakes, but by the courage to reinvent themselves. And so, in that moment of choice and rebirth, a new story began to unfold, a story of hope, courage and love that flourished even in the harshest terrain of the Old West. Cole Maddox's journey didn't end there. It simply changed course, guided by the light Abigail brought to his life. The future, uncertain and challenging, awaited, but with it came the promise of better days, of a new beginning where love would be the most powerful force. And as the night deepened, leaving the turbulent past behind, the path before them opened, inviting them to move forward, together. Their fate had been sealed in that choice. An end, yes, but also the beginning of all that could be. Cole and Abigail's story was far from over, and what lay ahead would be a chapter of transformation and surrender, where the true victory would be the courage to love and let go of the past. If this story touches your heart, stay with me until the end. There's much more to discover, and their journey still holds moments that will stir your emotions.